Have you ever been so proud of something you built with your own hands, only to have your neighbors try to destroy it? 2 years ago, I thought I was living the American dream. I'd bought 20 acres of forgotten apple orchard and brought it back to life. But my success made some people so angry that they had me arrested for stealing trees that weren't even theirs. Today, I'm going to tell you how their lies backfired in the most spectacular way possible. Let me take you back to where this all started. My grandfather taught me everything I knew about farming when I was just a boy. He'd say, "Son, the land will give back to you exactly what you put into it, but you have to respect it first." When I found this property 2 years ago, my heart just about broke. 20 acres of apple trees, some nearly 50 years old, just sitting there dying. The real estate agent said most people would just bulldoze these old things, but I saw something different. I saw potential. I saw my grandfather's lessons coming full circle. I wasn't just buying land. I was rescuing a piece of agricultural history. That first year was back-breaking work. Sunrise to sunset, I was out there pruning dead branches, treating diseased bark, and nursing these old trees back to health. My hands were raw. My back ached. But every day I could see a little more life coming back into those branches. By fall, something magical happened. The orchard exploded with color. Red apples, golden apples, green ones, varieties I didn't even know existed on my property. The harvest was beyond my wildest dreams. 300 bushels of the most beautiful fruit you've ever seen. Now, my property sits right next to a housing development called Willowbrook Estates. Nice houses, well-maintained lawns, and an HOA that, well, let's just say they like their rules. While I was celebrating my first successful harvest, some of my neighbors were having very different conversations. Neighbor 1, "Did you see how perfect his apple trees look? That's not natural." Neighbor 2, "Right? I mean, how do you take dying trees and make them look like that in one season?" "Brenda, something's not right here. Those trees look too young, too." At first, I thought the comments were harmless curiosity, maybe even compliments. But when you've lived in small towns like I have, you learn to recognize the difference between interest and suspicion. The whispers started at the grocery store. People would stop talking when I walked by. Then came the comments at the farmer's market. "Customer, these apples look too perfect. You sure they're legitimate?" Narrator: "I laughed it off then, but my stomach was starting to knot up. What did they mean by legitimate?" The final straw came when Mrs. Henderson from the local bakery, my biggest customer, called. "Me, Mr. Henderson, I'm sorry, but I can't buy your apples anymore. People are saying, well, they're saying things. I can't risk my reputation." Friends, I have to tell you, hearing that broke my heart. This wasn't just about business anymore. This was about my character, my integrity. It's everything my grandfather taught me about honest work. But the rumors were just the beginning. Because 3 weeks later, I'd wake up to find 3 police cars in my driveway and handcuffs around my wrists. The charge: stealing 84 apple trees. Trees that didn't even exist where they claimed I took them from. In part 2. I'll tell you about the most humiliating day of my life and how my neighbors' lies were about to cost them everything. Make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell because what happens next will shock you. Asterisk. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, I'm sharing the story of how my neighbors had me arrested for allegedly stealing apple trees. I'd actually spent a year nursing back to health on my own property. Last time, I told you about the whispers and rumors. Today, you'll hear about the day those rumors turned into the most humiliating experience of my life. It started with an email. Now, I wasn't part of the Willowbrook Estates HOA. My property was outside their boundaries. But somehow, I got added to their community email chain. The subject line made my blood run cold. Evidence of theft. Stolen apple trees on my property address. Dear residents. Photographic evidence shows that 84 young apple trees have been stolen from our community park and illegally replanted on the adjacent orchard property. We have contacted law enforcement and demand immediate action. Friends, I had to read that email 3 times before it sank in. They were accusing me of digging up and stealing trees from their park. But here's the thing. I want you to remember this. Their park was nothing but a patch of grass with an old swing set. There weren't any apple trees there. There never had been. The HOA board launched their own investigation. Brenda, the HOA president, went door to door like some kind of detective, building her case against me. Brenda, look at those trees. They're too perfect, too young-looking. No one transforms an orchard that fast without stealing healthy trees from somewhere else. Neighbor Butt, didn't he say he's been working on them all year? Brenda, that's what thieves do. They create cover stories. Mark my words, we'll prove he stole our trees. Meanwhile, I had no idea this investigation was happening. I was just going about my business, selling apples, making cider, living my life, until the morning everything changed. October 15th. I remember the date because it was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my life. I'd just gotten an order for 200 bushels from a distributor 3 towns over. The biggest order I'd ever received. It was 7:30 a.m. I was loading baskets of apples into my truck, humming an old song my grandfather used to sing when I heard the cars coming up my driveway. Not just one car, 3 police cruisers. The lead officer walked up to me, his hand resting on his holster. "Are you Name?" he asked. "Yes, sir," I said. "What can I help you with?" "You're under arrest for grand theft. Specifically, the theft of 84 apple trees valued at over $15,000. I actually laughed. I thought it was some kind of joke. But then I saw the handcuffs, and I realized they were dead serious. They read me my rights right there in front of my apple trees. The trees. Right. I'd spent a year saving. As they put me in the back of that police car, I could see my neighbors from the HOA standing across the street. Brenda had her phone out, recording everything like she'd just solved the crime of the century. The local news picked up the story before I even got to the jail. "Local man arrested for tree theft." That was the headline. My phone was buzzing nonstop with calls from friends asking what on earth I'd done wrong. I spent 36 hours in county lockup. 36 hours in a cell, being treated like a common criminal. Do you know what that does to a man who's spent his whole life trying to do right by people? When I finally made bail, the damage was already done. 3 of my biggest customers canceled their orders. The farmers market asked me to take a temporary break from selling there. Even my friends were looking at me differently. But sitting in that jail cell gave me time to think. And what I kept thinking was, this isn't just about me anymore. If they can destroy an innocent man's reputation with lies and fake evidence, they can do it to anyone. The first call I made was to Daniel Morrison, an attorney who specialized in agricultural disputes. When I told him what happened, there was a long silence on the other end of the phone. "Daniel, let me get this straight. They're saying you stole apple trees from a park that doesn't have apple trees?" Narrator: "That's right. Daniel, and these are the same trees that have been on your property since before the HOA even existed?" Narrator: "Yes, sir." Daniel: "Well, this should be interesting. Don't worry. We're going to get to the bottom of this, and when we do, they're going to regret they ever heard your name." Daniel was right. It was about to get very interesting. Because what we discovered during our investigation would not only clear my name, but expose a conspiracy that went deeper than I ever imagined. In Part 3, I'll show you the evidence we uncovered, the lies that unraveled, and how we built a case that would change everything. You won't believe what we found. Make sure you're subscribed. Part 3 is when the real story comes to light. Asterisk. Welcome back to what might be the most unbelievable story I've ever lived through. So far, I've told you how my neighbors falsely accused me of stealing apple trees, had me arrested, and nearly destroyed my reputation. Today, I'm going to show you how the truth started coming to light, and how their lies were about to cost them everything. The day after I got out of jail, Daniel and I got to work. "The truth is on our side," he told me, "but we need to prove it beyond any shadow of a doubt." So that's exactly what we did. First, requested the property survey from when I bought the land. Right there in black and white, 84 mature apple trees, clearly marked on the original plat. These trees had been there for decades. Next, we pulled up aerial photographs from Google Earth, going back 6 years. There they were, my apple trees, standing in the exact same spots they are today. Long before the HOA even existed, but the smoking gun came. When Daniel sent an investigator to examine the so-called crime scene, the stumps in the HOA park where they claimed I'd stolen the trees from, Daniel, you're not going to believe this. I had a certified arborist examine those stumps they're calling evidence. Narrator. And, Daniel, they're not apple trees. They're not even fruit trees. We've got maple stumps, a few dogwood, on what looks like some ornamental shrubs the HOA had cut down years. Let's go for a playground expansion. So let me get this straight. They accused me of stealing 84 apple trees from stumps that were never apple trees in the first place. Either they were completely incompetent, or they were lying through their teeth. As we dug deeper, a darker picture started to emerge. This wasn't just a case of mistaken identity or small-town gossip. This was a coordinated attack. Through legal discovery, we got access to the HOA's internal emails. What we found was shocking. Email from Brenda to the board, dated 3 months before my arrest, that Orchard is making our community look poor and agricultural. We need to find a way to shut him down. Another email, I don't care if we can't prove he stole anything. Plant the idea and people will believe it. Doubt is all we need. And then the worst one. Make sure the police report mentions the highest possible dollar amount for the stolen trees. We want felony charges, not a misdemeanor. But they made one crucial mistake. In their rush to destroy me, got sloppy with their lies. We found text messages between board members from the day they filed the police report. One message read, I know the stumps aren't apple trees, but who's going to check? Another text, even if the charges don't stick, will ruin his reputation. No one will buy apples from a suspected thief. Friends, I want you to understand what this means. They absolutely knew they were filing a false police report. They knew they were destroying an innocent man's life with lies, and they did it anyway. The preliminary hearing was supposed to be a formality, just a chance for the prosecutor to present their evidence. But Daniel had other plans. Brenda strutted into that courtroom like she owned the place. She was dressed to the nines, carrying a folder full of what she called irrefutable evidence. Brenda, Your Honor, the defendant's trees are clearly too healthy, too uniform. No legitimate farmer could achieve such results in one season without stealing established trees from elsewhere. Daniel. Objection, Your Honor. Is Mrs. Brenda qualified as an agricultural expert? Judge. Sustained. Ma'am, please stick to facts, not opinions. Then Daniel stood up with our evidence. One by one, he laid out the proof. Daniel, Your Honor. Here are aerial photographs showing these exact trees in these exact locations 6 years ago. Here's the original property survey. Here's the arborist report proving the alleged crime scene contains no apple tree stumps. And here are text messages from the accusers admitting they know they're lying. The judge's expression went from neutral to shocked to angry. He looked at Brenda and said, Ma'am, do you have any actual evidence of theft, any at all? Brenda, well, everyone knows he had to have stolen them. Look how perfect they are. Judge, everyone knows is not evidence. This case is dismissed. All charges dropped. I was free. Completely vindicated. But you know what? I didn't feel like celebrating. I felt angry. Angrier than I'd ever been in my life, because even though I was cleared, the damage was done. My reputation was still in tatters. I'd lost thousands of dollars in business. And worst of all, some people still believed I was guilty. Despite all the evidence, that's when Daniel pulled me aside and said something I'll never forget. Justice isn't just about proving innocence. Sometimes it's about making sure the guilty pay for what they've done. What happened next changed everything, not just for me, but for every single person who had participated in their conspiracy. Because sometimes, when you try to destroy an innocent person, you end up destroying yourself instead. In Part 4, the final chapter, I'll tell you about the lawsuit that shocked our entire town, the verdict that left my accusers speechless, and how justice finally, truly was served. You absolutely cannot miss this conclusion. Subscribe and hit that bell. You're going to want to see how this ends. Asterisk. Welcome to the final chapter of the most unbelievable story I've ever lived through. Over the past 3 episodes, I've told you how my neighbors falsely accused me of stealing apple trees, had me arrested, and tried to destroy my life with lies. Today, I'm going to tell you how the tables turned completely, and how their conspiracy ended up costing them everything. After the criminal charges were dropped, most people told me to just move on. You won, they said. Let it go. But I couldn't. This wasn't just about me anymore. I kept thinking about other people who might not have the resources to fight back like I did. What happens when an HOA decides to destroy someone who can't afford a good lawyer? What happens to the next person who doesn't have the evidence I had? Daniel, we can sue them for defamation, malicious prosecution, false arrest, and loss of income. But I have to warn you, this will be expensive, time-consuming, and they'll fight back hard. Narrator, how hard can they fight when they've already been caught lying? Daniel, that's exactly the attitude we need. We didn't just sue Brenda and the HOA board. We sued every single person who had knowingly spread the lies. Every board member who had participated in the conspiracy, and the HOA itself as an entity. The lawsuit was comprehensive. $4 million in damages for defamation, loss of income, emotional distress, and punitive damages to make sure nothing like this ever happened again, the filing stated. The defendants engaged in a systematic campaign to destroy the plaintiffs' reputation and livelihood through knowingly false accusations, fabricated evidence, and malicious prosecution. At first, the HOA thought they were untouchable. Brenda actually laughed when she was served with the lawsuit papers. Brenda, he can't touch us. We're protected by HOA bylaws. Besides, who's going to believe he deserves $4 million for some hurt feelings? But their confidence started cracking when their lawyer explained the reality of their situation. HOA lawyer. The problem is the evidence. The text messages, the emails, the false police report, it's all documented. They have you on record admitting you knew the accusations were false. During depositions, the whole conspiracy fell apart. One by one, the defendants were forced to answer questions under oath. Daniel, Mrs. Brenda, did you instruct board members to find a way to shut down my client's orchard? Brenda may have expressed concerns about property values. Double quotes, Daniel. Did you send an email saying you needed to find a way to shut him down? Brenda, yes. Daniel, did you know the tree stumps in the park were not apple trees when you filed the police report? Brenda, I'm not a tree expert, double quotes, Daniel. The question is simple. Did you know? Brenda quietly, yes. One by one, they all cracked. Board members admitted they were pressured into supporting the lies. Neighbors confessed they had spread rumors they knew weren't true. The whole house of cards came tumbling down. When the trial began 6 months later, the courtroom was packed. Word had gotten out about the case, and people came from 3 counties to watch. Local reporters, farmers, even some of my old customers who had abandoned me were there. The prosecution, that's us, presented our evidence methodically. Phone records, emails, text messages, testimony from the arborist, aerial photographs going back decades. Every single piece of evidence pointed to the same conclusion. This was a deliberate conspiracy to destroy an innocent man. But the most powerful moment came when I took the stand. Daniel asked me to describe what the false accusations had done to my life. Your Honor, I said, I lost more than money. I lost my place in this community. I lost customers who had become friends. I lost sleep. I lost my peace of mind. And I nearly lost faith that good people would stand up for what's right. But most of all, I lost the joy I felt every morning walking through my grandfather's orchard. They didn't just try to take my business. They tried to take my connection to the land that raised me. The defense tried everything. They claimed it was all a misunderstanding. They said they were just concerned citizens trying to protect their community. They even tried to argue that I was too successful too quickly, so their suspicions were reasonable. But when Brenda took the stand for cross-examination, it was all over. Daniel, Mrs. Brenda, you've testified that you believed my client stole trees. But didn't you also say in an email that you didn't care if you couldn't prove theft? Brenda, I was frustrated. Double quotes. Daniel, didn't you write, and I quote, plant the idea and people will believe it. Doubt is all we need? Brenda, that's taken out of context. Oh. What context makes it acceptable to deliberately plant false doubts about an innocent person? Brenda, I don't know. After 2 days of deliberation, the jury returned. I've never been so nervous in my life. This wasn't just about money. It was about whether 12 strangers would believe that justice mattered. Has the jury reached a verdict? The judge asked. We have, Your Honor. On the count of defamation, how do you find? Guilty on the count of malicious prosecution. Guilty. Guilty on every single count. And then came the number that changed everything. The jury awards the plaintiff $4.2 million in damages. Friends, I want you to know I didn't cry because of the money. I cried because 12 people I'd never met had listened to the evidence and decided that truth matters, that justice matters, that you can't destroy innocent people without consequences. The verdict devastated the defendants. Brenda lost her house trying to pay her share of the judgment. The HOA dissolved within 6 months, unable to function under the financial burden. Several board members had to sell their homes and move away. Do I feel sorry for them? That's complicated. I feel sorry for their families who got caught up in their mess. But for Brenda and her co-conspirators, they made a choice to try to destroy an innocent person. They have to live with the consequences. With the settlement money, I expanded the orchard to 35 acres. I hired local workers, built a cider mill, and started shipping apples across 3 states. The same people who once whispered that I was a thief now line up to buy my products. But the sweetest victory isn't the money or the business success. It's walking through those rows of apple trees every morning, knowing that I didn't just save an orchard, I proved that truth will always outlast lies. If you take anything from this story, let it be this. Never let other people's lies define who you are. Document everything, stand your ground, and never be afraid to fight for what's right. Because sometimes, the sweetest victory is biting into an apple grown on your own land, knowing that the people who tried to destroy you ended up paying for every single bite. My grandfather always said the land gives back what you put into it. Turns out, life works the same way. Plant truth, water it with perseverance, and eventually you'll harvest justice. Thank you for staying with me through this incredible journey. If this story touched you, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe for more real-life stories of people standing up for what's right. And remember, no matter how dark things seem, truth has a way of growing back stronger than ever. Asterisk.